Hey guys, so this video will mainly focus on Unity's animation system and how it's actually ported towards GraalScript 2. It's a really powerful system because it can handle player moving, player jumping, every single animation states very smooth, very easily, and in a very smooth manner. So first, let's hop into Unity and create our first animation. Now, for that, we're going to keep it rather simple and use like a basic object, like a sphere. Okay, so the way to actually create an animation is first open the animation window. You can go to Window, Animation, Animation. It will open this window. We're going to select our sphere object and create a new animation for it. We're going to name our animation. In that case, let's name it back and forth. Let's save it. And let's make this sphere actually move. Now, the way the animation can work from here, you can either have a model with already built animation from Blender, for example, and just throw it right here and actually have it work directly, or you can actually create your own animation system with Unity. So the way to do it, you'd have to choose a property. In this case, the transforms want to change the position. So the way to actually edit and create the animation is to press the record button and choose at each keyframe where we want our values to be. So right here we want to start at 0 and end at 0. But in the middle we want it to be at y equal 2. So now when I hit play, as you can see, the sphere is actually going back and forth, up and down. Very simple animation, and we have it saved. Now we can create another animation. We'll just create a new clip. Let's create a triangle animation. Now for that, we're going to make the sphere move in a triangle shape. So first position is going to be here. We're going to make it a bit faster also. Then we're going to position it at -1. Then we're going to go towards 1. Actually, let's make it first going to position at 2. Then we're going to go to -2. And then here we're going to go towards 1 on the y-axis. So when we actually play this animation, you can see something very interesting. As soon as we get to the last keyframe, it automatically jumps to the first one without this little small delay that we have here going from 10 to 20. So the best way to compensate for that is go to 30 seconds and actually create the same exact frame. So this one, which is at 0, 1, 0, we're going to recreate it right here, 0, 1, 0. Now when we hit play, we do have very fast triangle animation. Well, this is really fun and all, but it's really basic. It's just creating animation, how to use keyframes. You can actually use sprites, you can use the Blender models, really any types of animation to create. But the really amazing thing about Unity is the way its animator works. So to access the animator, just hop into Windows, Animation, Animator, right here. Now, the way the animator works is very powerful because it essentially handles the state. For example, these are all the animations attached to our object. Now, we can actually tell Unity that we want to play this animation when we're doing something specific. For example, when the player is moving, I want to play the moving animation. When the player is jumping, I want to play the jump animation. When he falls down and not moving, I want to play the idle animation, the one where it just stands around. So same thing right here. Now there is two ways to actually trigger an animation. The first one is manually via code. We're going to see how that works in GraalScript 2 directly. But another way to do it is actually by making a transition between animation states. This is the back and forth animation, and this is the triangle animation. So we can make a transition going from and towards. Now, when we click on a transition, let's remove exit times to make it exactly instantaneous basically. And yeah, the way to actually control it is through parameters. Now there's four parameters that exist: a float, an integer, a boolean, and a trigger. So basically speaking, you can use it right here with the conditions. You can either use the float if it's greater or lesser than a certain value, then this transition will happen. Same with an int. Then you can actually do it with a boolean. So if it's true, this transition will happen. If it's false, the other one will. Or you cannot actually change it with you can actually change it with a trigger. Now a trigger is just when we activate the trigger, if I was in that state, I make the transition, basically. We're going to use something very simple and use a boolean. We're going to call it a swap. So now, back and forth, when the swap is equal to true, we're going to go to triangle. And we set swap to false, we're going to go to the back and forth, essentially. So now we've set up, now you can actually see that inside the Unity game. So if I start playing, you can see by default we're going back and forth. When we trigger the swap, we're going with a triangle. When we take it off, we're back to back and forth. And we can actually manipulate these variables through code in GraalScript 2. So now we're going to build a bundle, upload to GraalScript 2, and actually control the animator. Jumping into GraalScript 2, as we can see, we just create a simple spawning of the sphere that we created. So just loading this animation test bundle that we created. We're destroying the myAnimation object, so we're naming it just to have at every single update one single instance of the object. And we're actually instantiating it and just parenting it to the player, so wherever we move, it's always on the player. Now, first things first is we're gonna have to access the animator. So this .animator is equal to this .sphere .get component of type animator. Now, it's extremely simple and very easy to actually change the behavior. So hitting apply, you can see that we do have this back and forth animation. Now, when I actually come and say this .animator .set bool, and I give it the bool, set the bool. Now I have to pick the boolean and actually set it. So the first argument will be a string. Hopping into Unity, the string is actually a swap. This is the name of the boolean we want to actually change, because you may have many booleans available right here for many different animation or transition between animations. So swap, and now we're going to set its value, in this case to true. Now if I hit apply, we can see it does the triangle animation. Setting it back to false, it goes back to the back and forth. And really in that way you can create a lot of things. For example, you don't have to actually manipulate it yourself. You can go with a player speed. So for example, say the movement animation. Right now my player has a certain speed that is decreasing and actually increasing depending if I'm pressing the arrow keys or releasing them. Now I can, on every frame, check the speed value, and if it's greater, and actually have it set to a speed value inside the animator. And then I can check for a transition if it's greater than a specific value, an arbitrary value to start, maybe greater than 0.1 or greater than 2 if you want to make it floaty a bit. You can then start the actual movement animation. So yeah, so you can really use set bool, set int, set float, or set trigger. Set trigger will only take the trigger name and we'll just trigger it, then untrigger it for the animation to happen and be over. To actually manipulate your animation tree, let's say, to create whatever you want in terms of animation. Now, it can be movement, it can be actual visual animation, it can be effects. Really, this animation system is really in depth, and I would highly recommend checking out some tutorials on it. But I also wanted to glance over an extra thing. So let's first go to Unity. Now, say the actual transition are too complex to create, and there is no way to actually link two animations together logically. So there is actually a way in Unity to compensate for that, and it's actually calling an animation manually. So by updating this controller or this animator and actually uploading it to the server again, now having updated the actual animator, if I hit apply, if I actually change set bool to true and hit apply, as you can see, it did not, well, update the asset because there's no longer that transition that we have. Now, the way to actually control an asset manually, an animation manually, is to actually directly play it. The way to actually choose this animation is to give the string of the animation name. So in our case, triangle. Now if I hit apply, triangle plays. If I want to go with back and forth, hit apply, it plays. And something more that can be done with the animator is actually its customizability. Now you can see that triangle is really fast. So what I can actually do to compensate is I can take the animator and change the speed at which it's going. So for example, 0.1. If I hit apply, here's the speed at which it's going. For example, 0.1. If I hit apply, you can see that the animation slowed down. Of course, if we go back to the back and forth, this animation will also be slowed down by the same amount. So you can really actually create something more gradual, for example, making an animation go faster, smoother, depending on where you are in a specific movement. For example, for the movement, well, the animation will be the same, but if my player is rather slow, I would like to have the speed be a bit slower for the steps to be on sync with the actual movement. And really, these are the main two ways, either setting booleans, setting floats, and using Unity's system to actually manage the playing of the animations via booleans, floats, triggers, or ints. Or you can create your own system to manage it based on states in your game, in your actual logic, to actually play the exact animation you would like to play with the playback speed that you want. Well, now a really cool thing about animations is that they can also trigger events. Well, let me explain. As you can see in the back and forth animation, we never know in which state we are, and it would be really inefficient and really hard to actually count every minute because you never know when the animation starts, and it can be really daunting. So the way Unity works with that is you can actually add an event. Now, when you add an event, you're gonna get this this view, and if it doesn't appear directly, just actually go to the project in your animation, double click it, then open it, and then you should be able to access it. So what we're going to do, we're going to name it on animation event, and then let's give it parameters. For example, at the top, and maybe an int, like 2, for example purposes. So now this event, this animation event, will always be triggered at this exact keyframe when we're actually reaching the top in this back and forth example. And through GraalScript 2, we can actually read this event being called and act upon it. Now, the way this works is very simple. So first, we're going to add the event handler, which is the on animation event handler, and then we're going to cache the event object. So as simple as putting it, basically, we're just going to add on animation handler to the sphere, and catch the object from the sphere, which is on animation event. And when we catch it, we're going to go to the function test, which is written right here, and check which are the arguments that are given to us. So hitting apply on this code, yup, we do get at the top. And this is something cool to notice, that we did not actually get the int that we saved, but only the string in the arguments variable. And yeah, as you can see, if we change from go.name, we are going to get my animation, so it's not the actual integer. So this is really a way to actually manipulate events. For example, a really cool way to use it is inside the movement animation. When I put my right foot down, I can have an event that would call a sound manager or something to use the right footstep sound to actually play it. Same with the left footsteps. And you can really use it to your advantage. So for example, at every time we go to the top, I may create something a bit more dynamic. Or I can just object, destroy, well, the game object, for a simplicity example. Now once the guy is at the top, just disappears. So yeah, these are basically animations, the way to actually control them in GraalScript 2, and the way to take advantage of events that we can write. And really now the possibilities are endless in how you want to manipulate animations and actually insert them into your own custom object, custom gameplay loops that you want to create. And I would highly recommend just diving deeper into Unity's animation system and using this guide to basically translate from Unity to GraalScript 2, without forgetting, of course, the actual documentation to directly translate or directly convert from Unity to GraalScript 2. And if you feel that really is overwhelming and you need some help with it, just hop in on Discord and we'll be more than glad to help you out with questions and answer them.